Welcome to the NBA 2K G League show. I am your host, Varun Charya, and welcome to the show. So on today's episode, we are going to talk about the Mike Budenholzer firing and how that affects the Valley Suns. So let's get straight to it. So, first things first, John Little, the Valley Suns head coach, he was actually an assistant coach with the Wisconsin Herd, which is the G League affiliate for the Milwaukee Bucks, which Mike Budenholzer was a coach for about probably 3 to 4 years. Mike Budenholzer was the one who brought John Little into the fold. And John Little, he has experience with, winning basketball. He was with the Maine Celtics last year, a team who got all the way to the finals. So John Little, I thought, has been a really great coach. And, the question is, how does this really affect him? Well, here's something that's really important. Matt Ishbia last week talked to the media, and he said that the most important thing to him moving forward is having an identity for the Phoenix Suns. But what does that exactly mean? So Chris Haynes on his new YouTube channel, The Haynes Brief, said that the Phoenix Suns are looking to bring in more of a defensive identity. And if that is the case, the question really is John Little that type of coach? Because really a lot of the things that the Phoenix Suns are going to be doing really is going to trickle down to the Valley Suns, and especially if you're going to be looking for more defensive type of players that fits that defensive type of identity. So, my thoughts of John Little, I thought he was a good coach because for a team in their first year in the G League, he did pretty good. They made the playoffs. They were fourth in the playoffs in terms of the West Coast this year. They did a phenomenal job. And I think it's not a really easy job, when you're first year as a team. I mean, you don't have a lot of returning rights. You don't have, it's a new type of city. You don't know what it's going to be like. The fan base, it's just a lot of new things for a franchise. And, it's not always as common to see a new franchise make it their first year. And John Little did a really good job. I thought Colin Gillespie, having to balance Colin Gillespie, Ty Washington, Jalen Bridges, and sometimes having Oso Iguodala in the lineups. He never knew. I mean, if Kevin Durant went down with Phoenix, you then see Ty and Jalen Bridges sometimes have to go up to Phoenix, to be some depth for the main team. So that was something I thought John Little did a good job with in terms of balancing out, the team. So I was very impressed, and it doesn't necessarily mean that just because a head coach, for the NBA team gets fired, the G League head coach is also going to get fired. Last year we know the Pistons had fired their head coach. So then we saw that they hired JB Bickerstaff. Now Jamel McMillan, the son of Nate McMillan, was the head coach for the Motor City Cruise last season and this season. So he also was with the team regardless of the head coaching change with the NBA affiliate. So the question is, will John Little be back? I hope so. I thought, again, he was a good coach. I think he did a great job having to balance lineups when he could. I think he has the experience being the associate head coach of the Maine Celtics, being with the Wisconsin Herd for about 4 years as an assistant. So let's see if he gets another year. But I think the question is, now you're looking at the roster, right? What is the plan for this next year? So you have guys like David Stockton, Mamdi Diakite, who you have to think, are they going to be back next year? We've seen David Stockton play for a lot of different G League teams throughout his career. He might also just go overseas, or he might even retire. I mean, he's also, in his 30s. It's very possible, he has kids. You just don't know with these guys who are older, how much longer they're going to keep playing. So the question is, okay, if he isn't going to come back, then is Mamdi Diakite going to come back? Mamdi Diakite has kind of been in his last year, I'd say, maybe with the G League and the NBA. Again, I don't know what's going through Mamdi Diakite's head, but, what I can, think about from previous years of looking at guys in their last years in the G League and then who go overseas, if they don't get a call up that last year or in the G League, they don't typically, I feel like, always sometimes come back the year after. But also, that's, even if you do get a call up, they could very likely still go overseas a year after. I'm sure Mamdi Diakite probably has interest overseas. I could only imagine. I mean, again, I'm not a reporter. I don't know necessarily, but I mean, look, he's won an NBA championship. He's won an NCAA championship. He's won a G League championship. So he's obviously has a lot of championship winning experience. And I think I think that's important to at least kind of keep in mind, about him. So now you have to think, okay, if those guys aren't coming back, you're going to have the returning rights for next year. You're going to need to use those returning rights to probably trade for some other players. Also notable is that the Valley Suns don't own their pick for the 2025 G League draft. That first round pick was so they could get Jaden Shackelford, who the OKC Blue actually owned the Valley Suns first round pick. So again, if you use these returning rights of like D. Kite, David Stockton, you can get maybe another first round pick in the 2025 G League draft. And remember, some of these first round picks can actually end up working out. I'm going to always use Sam Morrell. I think he's a really good example. He was drafted number 1 in the 2022 G League draft, did really well with the Cleveland Charge, got a 2-way contract, got converted to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and has been playing minutes with the Cavaliers ever since. It can work, but again, in the Valley Suns situation right now, because they were a good team, that pick anyway for the OKC Blue is going to be probably the 20s, actually. So it doesn't really matter too much, but you have to look at who can they trade to maybe get more picks. That's going to be the question. You also see a Cassius Stanley. He actually signed overseas. So in Cassius Stanley, he wasn't on Exhibit 10 this year. He was on a regular G League contract. So that's probably 40 to 50K. So, it is common where you can sometimes see guys who play in the G League for 1 year, then play in the then play overseas the other year, come back to play the G League, because again, they're making a lot more money overseas. It kind of, in a way, probably helps balance the finances, but that's just something I've noticed. So, the question is, who's really going to be back? I mean, maybe Tyrese Samuel is, but a lot of times these guys go work out with different NBA teams. If an NBA team has more interest in them, they potentially have a better chance of getting an NBA roster spot or a 2-way contract. They're going to go there. And so we don't know about Tyrese Samuel. We don't know about Moses Wood. That's going to be something to look at very closely this summer. Who is going to be part of that Suns Summer League roster from the Valley Suns from this past year. Now let's talk about the 2-way contracts. Ty Washington, Jalen Bridges, and Colin Gillespie. Now, none of those 2-way contracts were moved at all, meaning they didn't change any guys from those 2-ways. They didn't cut anybody. They didn't convert anybody. They pretty much kept all those guys on 2-way contracts throughout the year. Colin Gillespie is probably the most standout out of all those guys because he has a lot more NBA and G League experience. Ty Washington, he's going to his, now after this year, his 4th year technically in the NBA. And then Jalen Bridges, this was his first year with the NBA and the G League. So look, Colin Gillespie, I think, will probably get an NBA contract this summer. So that's going to open up a 2-way spot. Now, the other 2 things you have to look at is if defensive identity is important. You have to look at, is Jalen Bridges part of that defensive identity? Can we use him next year in NBA minutes if our guys get hurt? Then you also have to look at Ty Washington. I don't know too much about Ty Washington's in terms of his defense. I think he's more offensive minded to what I understand, what I've seen from him. So I'd like to see, what they're going to end up doing with their 2-ways this summer. It's very possible they look at somebody in the draft this year, they select somebody else, or somebody goes undrafted like they did last year, Jalen Bridges, and immediately sign him to a 2-way contract. That, again, these are very likely possible situations that happen. But just speaking about Ty Washington, I think going to his 4th year, this is his last year he can sign a 2-way contract, so it is going to be a very pivotal year. But you got to look at for Ty Washington, if he has, potentially an opportunity somewhere else in the NBA, a team who's more interested in giving him a bigger or better chance at NBA minutes, going to his 4th year, I think that's very important. But remember, Ty is also from Phoenix. He's from that area of Arizona, so maybe he does want to stay home closer by. But these are just things you have to look at going to the summer. I think it's just going to be very interesting to see if the defensive identity aspect is really in mind, how they're going to change their roster. I'm going to kind of talk about a player who I really like on the Valley Suns, Moses Wood. I think Moses Wood, he stands out to me because I think he does a lot of little things that don't get seen in the stat sheet. He makes the right pass. He hustles for the rebound. He can do a good job sometimes defensively. He can shoot some really good threes. I mean, in college, he was over a 40% three-point shooter. This year, I think he's around 38%, but I do think that number will go up next year if he's in the G League again. I think he's somebody that I'd hope teams kind of look more closely at. If it's not Summer League, at least for next year in a G League, maybe for a 2-way contract. Overall, I thought this was a good year for the Valley Suns. I thought they did a good job, with being a first-year franchise, and they had a good coaching staff. They had good players, especially veteran players, and remember something too that's important. They still do own the rights of some former NBA players from when they did their expansion draft. So we don't know from that list who could be there next year. So they do own the rights for Denzel Valentine and Quindarius Weatherspoon. So they do own some rights. And also Quindarius Weatherspoon was with the Phoenix Suns Summer League roster last year. So again, we don't know for next year what could happen. It really comes down to defensive identity, if that is truly the case. What they're going to be doing in the front office in Phoenix, if James Jones is going to be there after this summer, we don't know yet. But I thought the Valley Suns had a good first year. I thought, despite, having some guys in and out of a lineup, having some injuries at times, they found some good players that did a good job. I think they made a great trade midway in the season, getting Alex Shoemaker. He's done, I thought, a good job in terms of, I thought he was great offensively for his team, and I also really do like Jane Shackelford. Jane Shackelford, he's really good. I mean, he was somebody I really thought was going to get a call up this year, but it didn't happen. It is what it is. Hopefully this summer, if he has a good summer league, or maybe he plays again in the G League next year, I think he'll at least maybe be somebody to look at very closely, NBA teams. But the question is, this all is about the identity of the Phoenix Suns, and that identity will really tell us a lot about what this Valley Suns roster could be looking like, whether it's coaching staff, players, for next year. So, this is the NBA 2K G League show. I'm your host, Varun Charya, and have a great day.